Okay, when it comes to the mayor, again, we're going to have one mayor, which means there's one winner in this election. It's really simple. If somebody gets more than 50% of the first place votes. This happens all the time in ranked choice votes elections across the country. There's somebody who runs away with it. They have more than 50% of the first place votes. That's it. They're done. I should make an important point here. If you are, the only vote that counts is your first place vote. It's the only one that will ever count unless that person is eliminated. So in this example here, let's say, for example, in this example, we're running for mayor. No one has gotten 50% plus one of the votes. You voted for candidate E. No, they're in last place. And so they get eliminated. Your first place vote was candidate E. And so they're eliminated. Your vote, let's say you voted for candidate B in second, your one vote, you only have one vote, it goes up to B. All right, we're going to keep on going. Still, no one has 50% plus one. So we eliminate a candidate. Candidate D gets eliminated. And their votes roll up, in this case, to those voters' second choice, which is candidate B. All of a sudden, we've got a tie here. Now, candidate E has been eliminated. They go, candidate C has been eliminated, and those votes go some to B, some to F. Continuing to climb toward a 50% mark, but still no one's there. And finally, we're going to, of course, eliminate candidate F. And they go to the next choice. Boom, candidate B has now won because they've been elected with more than 50% of the vote. It's pretty straightforward, actually, the single winner ranked choice voting election. Again, it's important to recognize that your vote, your first place vote, is the only one that will count, unless that person is eliminated. You voted for somebody who nobody else likes, and then your second place vote will count. And if that person is eliminated, then your third place vote will count, and it could roll all the way down. I would not spend a lot of time trying to figure out how other people are going to vote. There's a lot of conversation right now about who the top two or the top three candidates are right now. Vote them how you like them. If you like somebody that seems to be a lower tier candidate, that's okay. Vote them number one. Because as long as you rank your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots, eventually you will find your way to the top two, to one of the top two. I suppose it's possible, again, with 19 candidates, you could pick 6 people, none of whom end up in the top two. That's okay. That's fine. But if you want to maximize your influence on who becomes the next mayor, pick your top 6 and rank them how you like them. All right, let's move on. City council. This is where it gets interesting. This is where it gets confusing. Because with 3 winners, you only need 25% plus 1 of the first place votes to win. Why is that? Well, if you think about it, if 3 people have 25% plus 1, that means the fourth place person has at most 25% minus 3. They can't possibly win. They've been eliminated. Okay? So that's confusing, and it's not the way we think of elections. But what we're trying to do here is elect 3 winners from a single pool of candidates with a single set of votes. Now, in this example, right away, we've got a front runner, we've got a runaway winner. Candidate A has gotten more than 25% of the plus 1 votes. But they got more votes than that. So what's going to happen is, and this example is a little bit simplified, but what's going to happen is the votes for that person are going to roll down to the second place votes. Let's just do a little math here. Just work with me here. Let's say first place person, candidate Jones, gets 30% of the first place votes. It doesn't mean we're gonna randomly pick 5% of their voters and give them their second choice. Rather, we're gonna have an interesting phrase, fractional votes. Rather, all 30% of those people who voted for candidate Jones in first place, 5/6 of their votes are going to go to Jones. 5/6 of 30 is 25%. And everyone, 1/6 of their vote is going to go to their second place vote. I know it's confusing. This is why you don't need to listen to this stuff. But the math does work. So in this example here, we have, again, on this example, my graphic here, they're all going to be whole votes. But understand that in the actual math, they're going to be fractional votes moving around. In this case, some of those candidate A votes were transferred over to candidate C, D, and E. And again, we're going to see somebody, not enough people, there's not enough candidates here who have 25% plus one. So we're going to eliminate, in this case, candidate D, the dark purple one there, and their votes get transferred up to candidates B and C. Now, candidate B here has more than 25% of the vote, and so they've been elected. And candidate C then gets one more vote transferred over, and they win because candidate B had extra votes, and it transferred over to candidate C. A little complex, but again, my recommendation is if you want to have the maximum influence on the outcome, definitely, especially in city council, use all 6 ranking spots. If your first place vote goes to somebody who's a runaway winner, your second place vote will matter. That person likely, could be the winner, and then your third place vote will matter. It's perhaps that third place person you've chosen is a loser and they've been eliminated. Now your fourth place vote counts. Again, we're only electing 3 people. The only reason your fourth place selection won't matter is if your 1, 2, and 3 all get elected. Yay! You had a huge impact on the outcome of the election. So we got to really understand that, especially with city council, where you have in the city of Portland, between I think the lowest one is there's 15 or 16 candidates running, and you get to choose 6 and 3 win. To the west side where we have 30 candidates, you choose 6 and 3 are going to win. Use all 6 ranking spots. Find a way to decide who's better or worse in your own mind. Who's got your priorities, your values, directions you care about. To maximize your influence, rank all 6, and don't worry about the strategy. Rank them how you like them. Put your favorite one up top, your second favorite in second. You're just a 4-year-old at Baskin Robbins picking your favorite flavors in order. All right, we are going to move to questions.
All right.
Do we have questions?
Kari, thank you so much. I know that you answered a lot of the questions that I had, but got a few more. We don't have any in the chat quite yet. Although I think Amber has some questions. I know I definitely do. I'm curious, how has ranked choice voting worked in other states? Do we have models that we can measure ourselves against? And what can we expect? How can we expect this to change the shape of our city over the next few years?
That's a great question. So I actually participated as a political consultant in the 2018 Democratic primary for governor of Maine. My client came in second. And it was the very first ever statewide election in American history that was done ranked choice. And what's interesting about how it's changing elections in other places and in Portland is now there's no longer a reason for candidates to go negative. Right? If I'm running, I not only want to win votes, but I want my rivals' supporters to choose me second. And so if I attack somebody, all I'm doing is pissing off their supporters. They're not going to vote for me, and I'm elevating them. And so what we're seeing actually in the city council election, and frankly, more or less in this mayor's race, a pretty positive election. The mayor's race is getting a little testy right now, but in the city council races, it's all positive all the time, which does I think make things a little bit more pleasant for voters. It also means we're talking about issues and values rather than trying to dig up dirt on each other, and so that's pleasant. It also means that we're going to have a council that then is set up to be more collaborative. Right? You're not going to have people elected who got elected by beating on each other. They're coming in a collaborative mindset. And I think that's very important to move things forward in the city. The other thing that's going to be different in this election is, and I believe it's going to happen for the first time in Multnomah County. Every other place I've ever worked or observed a ranked choice voting election, all you get is the first place votes on election night, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and they wait until they have all the ballots counted, until they run the algorithm and tell you who actually won. It can be very frustrating. In the case of Maine, we waited, I think, 3.5 weeks. That's not going to happen in Multnomah County. I've been told by county elections and the city transition officer, what's going to happen is they're going to count those first place votes on election night, And starting the next day, they're going to start running the algorithm every single day. We're going to see 50% of the votes come in on election night. We're going to see about 98% of the votes come in by Thursday after election day, so a couple of days. By that point, we're not done. From a legal standpoint, they got to count every ballot, but we're going to know who won by about Wednesday. If not on Tuesday night, we'll know on Wednesday or Thursday after election day. We're not going to be waiting until Thanksgiving to find out who won. That's important for transition reasons and all that. It's also going to be sort of a whole lot less frustrating for the candidates and the public.
That's so fascinating. That was one of my questions too, is when can we expect results? So definitive results maybe in a few days, but a general sense.
We're going to have a general sense. From an election administration standpoint, they actually don't certify the results until early December. But we've all moved on with our lives. The transition is underway. Things are happening. But they're over there sitting there worrying about things like ballots that fell in a puddle, and they got to pull the paper apart and help read, figure out who did it. A ballot that's dropped in, Multnomah County ballot that's dropped in Lake County or Lincoln City has to find its way to Multnomah County. They still count, but these last little stragglers are really a big concern for people who end up in recounts. I've done a recount before, and that's a lot of fun. You're chasing every last ballot. But for the general public, we're going to know within, if not on election night, within a couple of days.
Awesome. That's good to know. Cool. All right. I have more questions for you. You kind of alluded to this a little bit with the fact that a lot of the governance structures are going to be made, but I'm curious, what can we expect? What do you think we can expect in terms of cross collaboration across districts now that these bureaus are going away, that the silos have been busted more or less? And when do you think those governance processes will be made available to the public?
Well, a lot of it we're starting to see now in terms of the city administrative structure, right? The deputy city administrators that are in place, and they are, sort of working through how they administer the bureaus. How the legislative process goes is going to be something for the new city council to figure out for themselves. Again, they are being handed a whole lot of proposals by the sort of transition of government process. But they'll have to make those decisions. What do amendments look like? How are we going to oversee the budget? How are we going to, hold the city administrator accountable and those kinds of things? They also are going to be very, very busy. We have big problems that they need to tackle right away. So they're going to be at some level flying the plane while they build it, as they say. So we also have to recognize that what we're going to have is a whole lot of rookies. There are, of the 98 candidates running for city council, only 2 have ever served on the city council. Current Commissioner Dan Ryan and former Commissioner Steve Novick. Now, a bunch of them have been in other places. We have people who are on the PCC board, the Portland Public School Board, former Metro councilors, former county commissioners, folks who've served in very senior roles as agency heads and gubernatorial staff and that kind of thing. But we have exactly 2 people who've ever been on city council. And I'll leave it to voters to decide whether that's good that they bring over that experience or bad because they bring over that baggage. But we're going to have at least 10 and maybe 11 or 12 people who've never served on Portland City Council before. And so they're going to have to figure out how this all works. And while inventing a new way of doing city council. So it's going to be a very interesting process. I think we should all be watching it. I know there's a documentary crew cruising around, tracking all of the candidates and seeing how they operate. And I think they're going to keep going. So we're in a big change in the city of Portland, and one that I think is long overdue.
Yeah, I remember when I moved here and I learned about the commission structure, and I was just so bewildered that we had this, and so glad to be able to vote on changing it, and that the changes are coming. And on that note, on another change that we're excited about, we have a question from the audience about ranked choice voting. Their question says, how does ranked choice voting eliminate possible bias on the order that ballots are counted?
The order that ballots are counted. So the order of the ballots being counted doesn't matter at all. We're going to see, ballots are going to come in. Some people, you're going to get your ballot in the next day or two. They're being mailed today. And so you're going to get, some people get them tomorrow. Most everybody should have them by Friday. Now, we're going to see most people hold their ballots. That's the behavior of Portland voters has been that we see about 2/3 of the ballots voted between the Friday before Election Day and Election Day. We've also shifted now. You no longer have to get them in by 8 p.m. on Election Day. You have to have them postmarked by 8 p.m. on Election Day. And so some ballots actually show up on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, although the Postal Service is pretty good about moving them pretty fast. The order in which they're counted doesn't matter at all. As I said, what we're going to see is they're going to run the algorithm every single day. But when they do that, they're going to start over from scratch. It's not like they say, oh, on the Tuesday ballots, we eliminated these 4 candidates. On the Wednesday ballots, we kept going, and oh, now we eliminated a few more. They're going to run the algorithm on the full database of votes every single day from the top, as it were. And so you might actually see, if it's really, really close, or at the bottom end of the elimination rounds, gee, on Tuesday night, these 4 candidates were eliminated first, but then more ballots came in because they did a really good job of doing Election Day, get out the vote. They didn't get eliminated until they were, the 8th or 9th candidate, not the 27th or 28th candidate. So we're going to see some interesting sort of things happen in the counting, but understand that every vote counts the same. It doesn't matter when you get your ballot in, as long as you get it in, postmarked by Election Day or dropped off by Election Day, every vote will count the same.
Awesome. That was a good question. Kind of along that note, you maybe talked about if a ballot gets dropped in a puddle, but what does happen if your ballot gets damaged? How do you know that your vote still counts?
There's a couple of things to talk about there. One is, as I said, I've been involved in recounts, and there's all kinds of fun things you learn about how that works. For example, in Oregon, you can drop your ballot in any drop box. It doesn't have to be in your county. So if you work in Washington County but live in Multnomah County, you take your Multnomah County ballot to Washington County, you voted at lunch at your office, you could drop it in the Washington County ballot box. That's fine. In fact, when we end up seeing is all 36 counties end up with ballots from the other 35 counties. And it can take a little while to get all those little stragglers from here to there. There's that one Lincoln City ballot's got to go to Pendleton. They call that the shuffle. Then there are ballots that are damaged, either by the voter or in transit. They go into a puddle. They've had beer-soaked ballots and coffee-soaked ballots and torn ballots and all the rest of it. And what happens there is the elections office will, pull that ballot apart, and they'll typically actually get a fresh ballot, and with at least 2 witnesses, a third person then goes through and remarks the ballot exactly as it is. And again, they all 3 have to agree, and that moves forward. There are mismarked ballots. So you might, for example, have filled in a bubble and then decide, oh, no, I did it wrong. And people will X that person out and fill in another bubble. Somebody will circle that new bubble or put an arrow on it or write the person's name. All that is fine. The ballot counting machine will kick it out. And then again, with 2 witnesses, a third election office worker will, again, remark that ballot, make a new ballot for you and push it through. The last thing that can happen is, as you know, you sign the back of your outer envelope where you put your ballot in and you mail it in. They check those signatures against the voter registration rules. And if a signature does not match, and they're pretty good at recognizing that everyone's signature isn't identical every time, but so they have a method to that particular bit of madness. If it doesn't match, they will contact you and let you know that your signature doesn't match. Now, it's possible your signature doesn't match because you were tired that day, because you registered to vote 5 years ago and your signature has changed. You were drunk when you voted. People's signatures change. It could also not match because your spouse signed it for you. And a lot of us have spouses who, will sign things for us. That doesn't work. They will catch you. I've had more than a few friends go like, oh, my wife signed it for me, and you got to go in. And your choice is to ignore the notification, in which case your vote will not count, or go into county elections and cure your ballot, sign it for real, and then your vote will count. And there's a deadline for that process. And generally speaking, people mostly ignore that whole process unless there's a recount happening, in which case campaigns will try and identify which of their supporters are the ones that need to have ballots cured, and they'll go chase them down and harass them until the end of time for the deadline.
Yes. Well, that restores a lot of faith in our democratic system for me, just to know that there's so much checks and balances.
County elections works very hard to make sure they count every single ballot and to understand what the voter's intent was. They're looking at a ballot and there's a person who's bubbled in and then crossed out, another one circled, and a name on it. they're going to work really hard to figure out what exactly that voter intended and make sure that vote is counted that way.
We have a follow-up question in the chat about this. How do the witnesses get chosen? Are they the same people for every single ballot that have an issue, or does it rotate?
Uh, so it typically starts with the internal county elections staff. But when we're in a recount mode, what typically happens is the two or more campaigns that are involved in that recount are allowed to send witnesses in, and they're not allowed to talk. They're not allowed to touch. They're not allowed to have opinions unless they just formally object and say, I think you've mismarked that ballot. You've miscounted that one. And we're going to have a conversation about it. And then they pull that ballot aside and bring in a lot more people to have a conversation about, well, did it, they bubbled in something, they X'd it out, and then there's a little weird dot in that other bubble. Did they mean to fill that out, or they just drop their pen? Is that they intend to vote that way? When that person wrote Adam, maybe it's Adam, maybe it's Andy. We're gonna have an argument about that handwriting, right? That kind of conversation will tend to happen. But in a recount mode where it really counts, where every vote counts, it'll be both sides or more than one side in this case. We'll come in and oversee that.
Awesome. We have another question about the districts themselves. Will they ever be redrawn, like when a new census comes out? How is that planned out for the future?
Yeah, so every 10 years, the Constitution requires us to do a nose count across the country. And the Supreme Court had ruled in the 1960s that every district must be, within a reasonable range, equal in size. So yes, after the 2031, no, the 2030 census, the numbers will come out in early 2031. And then in 2031, there'll be some sort of again, another districting commission that will adjust these boundaries a little bit, or maybe a lot. They could completely redraw them in a whole new way. More than likely, they'll just tweak to make sure the population, is correct. And then it'll be in the 2032 election, which will sync up then with the congressional maps and the state legislative maps and all the rest of it. The only reason we did this in 2023 this time is because this was a brand new charter change in 2022.
Awesome. Thank you.
Every 10 years.
That's good to know. Okay, I have one final question, and I don't have any others in the chat or the Q&A. So since we're not all political insiders like you are, and we don't always know who's paying lip service versus who's got a more verified background, I'm just curious, what resources do you recommend for folks, for average citizens, to get informed on a candidate's stance or policies?
Well, we'll start with the voters pamphlet. It's actually, I have I've voted in California before, and I know lots of friends who voted in other places. Other places don't have a voter pamphlet like we do. That's an Oregon thing. It's really quite an extraordinary resource. Then, of course, is every candidate gets to put in their own information, and they're going to put their best foot forward. But I look at those endorsements. They are required to have a signed form from every endorser that's in there. They can't lie about that. And the county is very good about tracking those down. So if you see somebody's name in there supporting someone, they are supporting that person. Other lies in the voters pamphlet, actually, it's a felony. So people don't lie in the voters pamphlet. They might lie in other things, but not the voters pamphlet. I would also just think a little bit about who you trust. Again, we have 98 candidates. Many of them have never run for office before. You don't know who they are, but they've been, spent the last year trying to chase down endorsements. And so, look to organizations that you trust and see who they've endorsed. They, of course, have websites. Think about what matters to you. And those endorsements, I think, are probably the most valuable resource. And then, depending on how much homework you want to do, read their stuff. Watch their interviews. There's a lot of podcasts that have been interviewing these candidates for a long time. The Oregonian has got endorsements as well as profiles involved. And Willamette Week will have their endorsements coming out tomorrow. Oregonian did theirs on Sunday. Willamette Week will have theirs on tomorrow about 6 a.m. We're all waiting. Make up your own mind that way. For sure. Again, you get to rank 6. I really recommend you rank all 6, both for mayor and city council. That gives you the most influence on the outcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kari. I learned a ton. I know everyone in the audience did as well. We don't have any other questions, so I think we can wrap it up. But just thank you again, Kari, for taking the time. And thank you to my colleague Amber as well for running the tech behind the
You bet.
scenes for us.
21 days to election day. Your ballot will be coming any minute now, November 5th. Make sure you get that ballot postmarked by 8 p.m. on November 5th.
And
Thanks
with
all.
all of your bubbles filled in.
Right.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.